I think I'll just end with a little passage from Teresa of Avila. And then we'll take a break. Where's Randy? He's not here. Am I right about the timing? Do I end at 10? Oh, okay, so and then we'll take a break from 10:15 to 10:30. So you notice that I'm busy deconstructing religion and religiosity to some extent, but I'm not throwing the baby of spirit out with the bathwater of institutionality. I'm not saying all organized religious structures are bad and wrong and limiting. There are jewels at the heart of all the world's great wisdom traditions that need to be safeguarded and raised up, especially in these times. So it's kind of the paradox, right, of the mystical way, is that we're reclaiming ordinary life and we're also tucking into our pockets those treasures that will be needed, not only for our own, to navigate our own spiritual lives, but to offer. Maybe instead of jewels and treasures, we should call it food and seeds that we need to harvest from the world's great wisdom ways and nourish ourselves and feed the world as we go. So the mystics like John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila and Julian of Norwich. You know, Christianity was the one wisdom tradition that I was not exposed to growing up. It was the one that my parents were very suspicious of, but that I reclaimed and fell in love with, or claimed, not reclaimed, claimed and fell in love with when I found John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila in Spain when I was 20. And they led me to Christ, the mystics. And so I ended up being a translator of Christian mysticism. It's very peculiar if you think about it, how that happened. But I draw on the Christian mystics a lot. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, Julian of Norwich, those are the three I translated, but also I have a deep intimacy with Hildegard of Bingen and Francis of Assisi and Clare, and through Sister Greta, how do you say her name properly? Hedwig. Hedwig, and some of the Beguine mystics. So, here we go. Teresa of Avila, what does she have to say? Page 60. Apparently I wrote down the wrong page. Whoops. Oh, well, I wrote down the wrong page, so I'll just read you something else. But you would never have known that if I hadn't just mentioned it. Just recently, I spent 8 days feeling spiritually dry and empty. This is, by the way, from her autobiography, The Book of My Life, which I had the great honor of translating. Just recently, I spent 8 days feeling spiritually dry and empty. I lost all sense of gratitude toward God and couldn't get it back, no matter how hard I tried. I couldn't remember any of the blessings He has given me. My soul had sunk into a terrible stupor, and I had no idea how it had gotten there. I couldn't help but laugh at myself. In a state like this, no matter how much wood the soul piles on the fire, no matter what else she does by her own effort, the flames of love will not burn. Through God's great mercy, she sees the smoke, so she knows the fire is not completely dead. The Lord will come back to rekindle it. Even though the soul bruises her head trying to blow on the embers and rearrange the wood, all she seems to succeed in doing is stifling the fire even more. I believe the best thing for the soul to do in this situation is to surrender totally. She needs to accept the fact that she can do nothing and occupy herself by being of service to others. So Teresa and John seem to agree that when we hit those dry patches, releasing our impulse to control the situation, to fill the emptiness with more spiritual practice, with deeper prayer, with longer fasting, with whatever the tricks are that we have in our bag to try to get to God. It is a matter of releasing all of our efforting and being with what is. John of the Cross, and I'll bring it to a close now, is John of the Cross uses a couple of analogies. One is the painter analogy. In Dark Night of the Soul, he says that it's like God is looking at you and saying, oh my God, you are so adorable. Well, that's not what John of the Cross says, but I like that. You are so beautiful. I want to paint your portrait. So please, beloved, would you just strike a pose, be yourself, just be yourself, but stay in that position, and I am going to paint you. And God sets up her easel, and she has all of the best colors, and you are comfortably seated, and your only instruction is to just be still while she paints your portrait, because you're that beautiful. And you do for a while. You get it. You get the instruction. You sit, and you've seen other paintings. You know how it works. But you can't seem to quite stay still. Not only because you're restless, but because you've got some good ideas. Like, you know what, God, that is not my best angle. I think it would be more fetching if I lifted my chin and like put that shoulder up. And God's like, could you just stop? Just stay still and let the master create her masterpiece of you. But we feel like we have to get involved. You know, and this is I promise, the last thing. He also uses the biblical story of Abraham and Sarah celebrating Isaac's weaning. Isaac, their beloved, impossible child whose name means laughter. Isaac is being weaned. And in the custom at the time was to throw a party in honor of this great event, of the weaning of the baby. So they bring the people from the desert, and everyone gathers at Abraham and Sarah's tent, and they have a big feast with their wine and figs and whatever else they bring to the feast. And everyone's partying and having a great time, except who? Little Mr. Laughter, who is crying his head off. He doesn't want to be weaned. He wants the breast. And who can blame him? He wants that warm milk that is endlessly given. But John of the Cross says a true, mature spiritual life is a kind of weaning, where we're removed from the breast because God knows that we're strong enough, we're ready, it's developmentally appropriate. And so we're lovingly removed from the breast and placed on our own 2 feet and handed a big chunk of crusty bread. And we learn how to eat it. But at first it feels like death. It's not death, it's that fiery doorway. And we're invited to walk through into an ordinary, extraordinary, sacred landscape. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mirabai. You know, Gladdening Light gets its name from the Phos Hilaron, which is the first Christian hymn in documented history. And it comes from the late 2nd century to the 3rd century. And Phos is the Greek word for light, and Hilaron is the root word for hilarity or gladness. Oh. So we could just as easily have called ourselves Isaac Light. right? There's so many rich traditions about gentle laughter and gladness in our books that we lean on.